may welcome you incredible souls navigating this wild journey. Let's get real. There comes a moment when giving too much becomes a burden, a weight that holds you back. You've reached that point, haven't you? It wasn't a sudden shift. They pushed you to this edge. You didn't just wake up indifferent, you evolved. Psychologists might call it compassion fatigue, a clinical term for being emotionally depleted by constant demands, a draining that extinguishes your capacity to care. But you didn't learn this in a lab. You lived it, felt it in the trenches of family dramas, strained friendships, and unbalanced relationships. They grew accustomed to your availability, hooked on your reactions, the explanations, the defenses, the justifications you offered like clockwork. They expected you to always play the game. But you reached a breaking point where tears, guilt trips, and manufactured crises lost their power. That's when the whispers started. They don't care anymore. What they perceive as coldness is actually clarity. What they label selfish is nothing more than survival. Let's be honest, the day you stopped striving to impress those who were never going to applaud you, you reclaimed something invaluable. Now they're talking louder because your indifference cuts deeper than any argument ever could. It unnerves them that you can laugh at what once broke you, yawn at what once shook you. And isn't it a little ironic? The same individuals who swore they didn't care about you are now dissecting your perceived lack of care in group chats. This is about that very shift, the point where you ceased handing out your energy like free samples and started safeguarding your soul as the precious gem it truly is. Stick with me, because by the end you'll see that this so-called detachment isn't a weakness or arrogance, but a profound step in your spiritual journey. First, you stopped explaining because they weren't really listening. And honestly, that's the heart of it. For a long time, you thought clarity would bridge the gap. If you just laid things out logically, step by step, showed them your heart, even pleaded your case, they would finally understand. But the brutal truth is they weren't invested in understanding you. They only listened to stockpile ammunition. They were simply waiting for their turn to twist your words or dismiss them altogether. It wasn't a conversation. It was a carefully laid trap. Once that sunk in, something inside you shut down. Explaining yourself became a Sisyphean task, like shouting into an empty void. The more you spoke, the more they pretended not to hear. When someone refuses to acknowledge your truth, every word becomes a wasted breath. This is what people often miss. You didn't just stop caring overnight. You grew weary of watching your sincerity weaponized against you. At some point, your peace became more valuable than proving your innocence to people who had already made up their minds. Here's the twist: the moment you stopped explaining, they panicked. Your explanations were their favorite bait they thrived on, dragging you into endless debates, watching you defend yourself into exhaustion. Without those explanations, they lost their grip. Suddenly, they couldn't twist your words or lure you into arguments. That silence wasn't weakness, it was a strategy they couldn't counter. And let's be real, they weren't confused. They knew precisely what they were doing. They understood you far better than they pretended. They acted clueless because it gave them power to watch you scramble for justification. When you stopped playing along, you broke that cycle. You demonstrated that your truth doesn't require an audience, doesn't need approval, and doesn't need to be repackaged for people determined to misunderstand you. That's why they're talking now. That's why they claim you don't care, because for the first time you flipped the script. You stopped giving them the drama they craved and chose to protect your energy. Nothing unsettles people more than realizing they've lost access to the part of you they once exploited. You're not falling for the same tricks, are you? Good. Secondly, you realize their approval was a constantly moving target. That's when everything truly changed for you. For the longest time, you strived to meet their shifting expectations, morphing yourself repeatedly, hoping that this time it would finally be enough. You yearned to be seen, accepted, to hear those validating words. Yet every time you got close, they moved the goalposts. One day it was your attitude, the next your choices. Then it was your past, your appearance, your timing. Regardless of what you did, it was never quite enough. Eventually, you recognized the pattern for what it was. It wasn't about your worth. It was about them ensuring you never felt worthy. You noticed how they thrived on dangling approval like a carrot. The moment you thought you'd earned it, they snatched it back, leaving you feeling diminished. They reveled in the chase, not because they wanted you to grow, but because keeping you in that cycle maintained their control. The more you chased their validation, the more power they wielded. Once that realization hit, your patience snapped. You stopped chasing a finish line that was never meant to be crossed. When you pulled back, it wasn't from a lack of ambition or desire for connection. It was from realizing their approval was a manipulation, not a gift. When someone's yes is just a way to keep you hooked, you stop craving it. You learn to validate yourself, to measure your worth by standards they couldn't touch. That's when they started labeling you arrogant, detached, or difficult. But really, you just learned the game. You stopped playing games where the rules are designed for you to lose. Their disapproval no longer stings because you've seen behind the curtain. You now know that nothing you ever did would have been taught good enough for them, not because you lacked anything, but because their power depended on keeping you in perpetual self-doubt. Once you broke free, their opinions became background noise, and that drives them absolutely mad. You no longer crave what they used to control you with. Thirdly, they mistook your kindness for an unlimited contract. They assumed it was a lifetime obligation. From the start, you gave freely. You listened when no one else would. You showed up when it was inconvenient, and you extended chances long after others would have walked away. That was simply your nature, to care, to forgive, to believe in the best in people. But somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing your kindness as a gift and started treating it as an entitlement. In their minds, your generosity wasn't something you chose to give. It was something you owed them. They began building expectations on your back, piling up demands as if your compassion was endless. Every time you forgave, it became proof that you always would. Every time you bent to accommodate them, it became proof that you always should. They mistook patience for permanence. They assumed your willingness to help was a lifelong guarantee, that no matter what they did, you would always be there to clean up the mess. And that's where they went wrong. Your kindness was never a binding contract. You never signed up to be someone's permanent crutch or emotional punching bag. You gave because it came from your heart, not from a sense of obligation. When people started taking without gratitude, when they treated your empathy like a bottomless well, it drained you. The moment you realized your compassion was being exploited, you had to pull back. Not because you stopped being kind, but because your kindness deserves respect, not entitlement. That's when the accusation started. Suddenly you were selfish, cold, ungrateful, all because you finally set limits on what they thought was limitless. But in reality, you were breaking a contract that never existed. You were reclaiming your right to give on your terms, not theirs. That's what unsettles them most. They don't miss you as a person, they miss the unrestricted access they had to your kindness. By walking away, you didn't lose your compassion, you protected it. You stopped allowing people to twist it into a leash. You reminded yourself that kindness is a gift, not a chain, and those who truly value it will never mistake it for ownership. They might be confused, but you are crystal clear, right? Fourth, you understood that pleasing them was actually starving you. Initially, it felt natural to bend, adjust, and compromise for harmony's sake. You smiled when you wanted to frown, agreed when you wanted to disagree, and swallowed your feelings so they wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Every time you put their comfort above your own, a little piece of yourself disappeared. It wasn't dramatic at first, just tiny concessions that seemed harmless. Over time, those tiny pieces added up until the person you were presenting to the world was no longer fully you. The irony, what looked like peace to them was actually self-erasure. They mistook your willingness to please as calm compliance, even weakness. They didn't see the silent compromises, the swallowed anger, or the resentment building inside. They never noticed how much you were sacrificing because they were too busy enjoying the illusion that everything was fine. Each time you tried to maintain the peace, you felt less alive, less real, and more like a shadow navigating someone else's expectations. The exhaustion of being everyone's source of comfort without receiving any in return became impossible to ignore. You noticed how your energy was constantly drained, your opinions dismissed, and your boundaries ignored. Then it hit you. Pleasing them wasn't a gift, it was starvation. You were nourishing everyone around you while starving your own soul. Once you realized that, everything shifted. You stopped sacrificing yourself for their comfort. You stopped rearranging your life to fit their moods and needs. You began reclaiming the pieces you had given away, rebuilding yourself with honesty and courage. Choosing wholeness became non-negotiable. You learned that real peace doesn't come from endless compromise. It comes from honoring yourself first. The moment you embraced that truth, the world noticed. Your presence became stronger, sharper, and unshakable, not because you stopped caring entirely, but because you stopped giving yourself away to people who never deserved the gift. You are feeding your own soul, aren't you? Fifth, they took your loyalty for granted until it snapped. From the beginning, you were consistent. You showed up when it mattered, defended them when no one else would, and remained committed when others walked away. That consistency wasn't a weakness. It was your integrity. Instead of valuing it, they weaponized it. Your loyalty became a tool they could manipulate, a proof point they used to guilt, control, and bend you to their will. Every time you stayed silent when you wanted to speak, every time you gave more than was fair, they logged it as evidence that you could always be counted on. Therefore, they could always push harder. They assumed your loyalty was infinite. They believed that no matter how much they took, you'd never detach. They calculated that you would always return, always forgive, always defend, and always absorb the consequences of their actions. Loyalty isn't an infinite resource. It has boundaries. The moment you recognized that your devotion was being exploited, that it had become their tool, rather than your choice, something inside snapped. Cutting the cord wasn't easy. It wasn't a sudden outburst of anger or rebellion. It was a quiet accumulation of awareness, a realization that your energy and integrity were worth more than someone else's control. When you stepped back, the reaction was immediate. They couldn't comprehend that loyalty abused turns into distance with no return ticket. The power they thought they had evaporated the moment you refused to be leveraged any longer. They didn't realize that loyalty is freely given as a gift. Loyalty forced into servitude becomes dangerous for the holder. When you walked away, you didn't just protect yourself, you also showed them the real cost of taking someone's dedication for granted. That's what unsettles them most. They were used to your consistency, but they weren't prepared for your choice to reclaim it, to redirect it toward yourself, and to refuse to let it be exploited again. In that moment, you became untouchable, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped allowing your loyalty to be a tool in their hands. You proved that what was once taken for granted now has boundaries, and nothing they do can change that. The lesson is clear: loyalty respected is powerful. Loyalty abused is gone forever. Feel this power right. Sixth, you saw that their love needed an audience. It was performative, not genuine. For the longest time, you believed in their words, their gestures, and the moments when they seemed to care. You thought their affection was genuine, that it existed simply because you mattered to them. But slowly, imperceptibly, the pattern emerged. Their love wasn't private, wasn't quiet, and wasn't unconditional. It only existed when someone else was watching, when it could be displayed, documented, or announced. Their care wasn't about connection. It was about control, about the satisfaction of proving to the world how much influence they had over you. Every compliment, every apology, every act of affection was performative. It wasn't for you, it was for the audience. They thrived on the optics, the idea that others would see you bending, adjusting, or depending on them. When the spotlight was gone, so was the warmth. What once felt like intimacy suddenly revealed itself as strategy. The affection you thought was love became a mirror reflecting their need to be admired, to be recognized as the one who could command your attention, your loyalty, your emotions. When you noticed it, the impact was brutal. You couldn't unsee it. You saw every calculated smile, every staged apology, every public gesture that had been more about them than about you. You understood that you had been participating in their performance without even knowing it. The trust you had given, the care you had invested, wasn't returned honestly. It was co-opted for their image. That's when the shift happened. Their actions no longer held the same weight. The words that once made your chest tighten now felt empty. You stopped craving their approval, seeking their validation, and being moved by gestures that were never meant to reach you. What they had mistaken for power over you crumbled quietly, because you finally saw the truth. Love that needs an audience isn't love at all. It's control masquerading as care, and once you recognized it, nothing they could do would fool you again. From that moment on, their affection became irrelevant. You weren't swayed by the performance, and you weren't going to let someone else's hunger for recognition dictate your emotions. Their love had conditions and cameras attached, and you chose freedom over being part of the show. You don't want the camera love, you want genuine love, right? Seventh, you realized that silence wasn't respect, it was control. They used your quietness against you. For years, you thought holding back, biting your tongue, or walking on eggshells meant you were being polite, mature, or understanding. You believed that your quietness was a sign of respect for their position, their feelings, or their authority. But you began to notice a pattern. The silence you offered wasn't being honored, it was being exploited. Every word you withheld, every opinion you swallowed, every moment you stayed calm under pressure wasn't inspiring reverence, it was giving them power. They thrived on your restraint. They fed off it, twisting it into proof of compliance. The longer you stayed silent, the more they assumed they could dictate your reactions, shape your decisions, and manipulate your emotions. Every attempt at conversation, every honest disclosure was intercepted, criticized, or weaponized against you. You began to see the irony. The same silence you thought showed respect actually built the walls of their control. Once you realized this, something shifted. You stopped confusing fear and coercion for admiration. You understood that genuine respect is earned through integrity, trust, and mutual recognition, not through intimidation or the suppression of another person's voice. With that understanding came liberation. The power they had over you, built quietly over years of self-restraint, began to crumble. You no longer allowed your silence to serve as a tool for someone else's dominance. The moment you started speaking, or even the moment you stopped letting them dictate your inner world, their reactions changed. Confusion, frustration, even anger replaced their previous confidence. They had counted on your restraint as proof of submission, and suddenly that proof was gone. Your words, your actions, and your presence could no longer be manipulated. From that point forward, you discovered a truth many never realize: silence only has value when it is chosen freely. When it is forced, it is nothing more than a leash. When you finally took it off, their control over you vanished, leaving them stunned in the absence of the power they thought was theirs. Eighth, their games became predictable, and predictable became boring. The shock value was gone. At first, you were caught off guard by the way they operated, the lies that seemed so convincing, the guilt trips that hit just the right nerve, the fake apologies that sounded sincere but always carried an unspoken agenda. Every time you reacted, adjusted, and tried to navigate the chaos, thinking maybe this time it would be different. After a while, patterns emerged. You started noticing the timing, the phrasing, the tells that revealed their intentions. Once you could predict their moves, the shock wore off. The fear, the confusion, the frustration faded. Their tactics no longer destabilized you because you'd seen them too many times to be fooled. The lies became transparent, the guilt trips laughable, and the fake apologies background noise. Predictability stripped their manipulation of its thrill, leverage, and control. With that loss of power came indifference. You stopped caring about their schemes, dramatics, and attempts to pull you into conflict. The energy they sucked from you bounced off because their patterns were no longer mysterious or intimidating. You didn't need to react because you knew what was coming. Their manipulation became a repetitive show that lost all entertainment value, and you weren't buying tickets anymore. That's when you noticed the irony. The consistency they relied on to control you became the reason you disengaged. Their reliance on tactics they assumed would always trap you ended up making them predictable, and predictability kills control. You stopped playing their game, being invested, and started protecting yourself. What was exhausting became irrelevant, and what was frightening became humorous in its repetitiveness. At the end of it all, their games lost power because you outgrew them. You didn't just stop caring. You saw the strings, understood the moves, and realized that being entertained by someone else's chaos was a luxury you no longer needed. They became a pattern, and patterns are easy to ignore. The same old story, right? Ninth, you learned that their truth changed depending on the audience. Honesty was a costume they put on and took off. At first it was subtle, a word, a detail, something that didn't quite line up. You thought you were overreacting or misunderstanding. Over time, the pattern became undeniable. They weren't committed to honesty. They were committed to appearances. Every conversation, explanation, and story was tailored for whoever was listening. What they told you in private rarely matched what they told friends, family, or strangers. That realization hit hard. Their words were never about clarity or connection. They were about control and image management. Each version of their story was crafted to manipulate perception, position themselves favorably, and create doubt, confusion, or admiration depending on the audience. Their truth wasn't a reflection of reality. It was a performance, and once you saw it, it was impossible to trust their words. The authenticity you believed in evaporated, leaving the cold mechanics of their deception. Detachment became inevitable. You stopped investing energy in believing, defending, or questioning them. Every time they shifted the narrative, your awareness sharpened. You no longer tried to reconcile contradictions or justify inconsistencies. You realized their loyalty was to perception, not to you, and that understanding their truth no longer served you. The inconsistency meant to confuse and control you only strengthened your independence. You no longer needed their validation, approval, or explanations. You observed their shifting stories, noted the gaps, and let their contradictions slide off you. What they tried to use as a tool of manipulation became proof of their unreliability and your clarity. By the time you understood their pattern, detachment wasn't just a defense mechanism, it was liberation. You stopped trying to catch them in a lie because it didn't matter. Their truth wasn't about honesty, it was about performance. Once you accepted that your energy became untouchable, your focus returned to what mattered, and your engagement with them became optional. You have your story, and that's more important, doesn't it? 10th, you realized survival requires selective investment. You can't pour water into a broken bucket. For a long time, you gave without calculating the cost, believing that effort, care, and attention could fix what was broken. You poured yourself into people, situations, and relationships that demanded more than they returned, thinking that your persistence, patience, or loyalty could change the outcome. The truth became unavoidable. The more you invested in them, the more you drained yourself. Your energy wasn't endless, and their constant demands were siphoning it away. The realization was sharp. Life isn't about giving everything to everyone. It's about discernment, about knowing which battles, people, and spaces deserve your time, attention, and emotional energy. Every second spent trying to prove your worth or salvage their approval was stolen from yourself. Every compromise that seemed small added up, leaving you depleted, frustrated, and disconnected from your priorities. Once you saw it, you couldn't ignore it. The clarity that came with this awareness was freeing. You began to identify where your energy had true value, where it could create results, where it could foster growth, and where it could nurture reciprocal relationships. Things and people that consumed you without giving in return no longer held power. They weren't worth the cost. They demanded a price your soul wasn't willing to pay. Choosing where to invest your energy didn't make you cold or detached. It made you strategic and alive. You discovered that selective investment is survival, that protecting your focus is self-respect, and that your life only becomes sustainable when you stop pouring into spaces that only take. Shifting your attention lifted the weight, faded the noise, and gave you the capacity to nurture what truly mattered. In the end, you realized that survival isn't about fighting for everyone's approval or proving yourself to the unworthy. It's about discerning where your presence counts and conserving your energy for the places and people that deserve it. That lesson became a turning point, one that ensured you were no longer drained, manipulated, and at their mercy. You're calling the shots now, right? 11th, you saw that they needed you more than you needed them. They had become dependent even if they didn't admit it. For years, they acted as if you were expendable, as if the world would keep spinning just fine without your presence, effort, or care. They tried to convince you that anyone could step into your place, that you were replaceable, and that your absence wouldn't matter. They wanted you to believe that your value was conditional, dependent on their whims and approval. The truth revealed itself. The very systems, relationships, and routines they leaned on were built around you, not the other way around. The irony was undeniable. The more they pushed and tried to manipulate you into doubt, the more their reliance on your energy became apparent. You began noticing the cracks. They worked to hide the confusion when you didn't respond immediately. The hesitation when they had to make decisions without your input, and the tension when your absence left them exposed. Their confidence, stability, and control were an illusion that only existed as long as you maintained it. Once you stepped back, the difference was immediate. The routines faltered, decisions required effort, and the power they assumed vanished. They realized that your presence had been their hidden pillar, the silent force holding things together, and that the image of replaceability was a story they told themselves to feel secure. That revelation shifted everything. You weren't just withdrawing. You were reclaiming the balance of power that had always been skewed. The moment you stopped feeding their illusion, you exposed the truth. Their strength was conditional. Their control was fragile. and their supposed independence had always relied on you. Understanding this gave you freedom. You no longer felt obligated to prop up a system that dismissed your value, and you no longer accepted their attempts to make you feel expendable. The knowledge that they needed you more than you needed them allowed you to step fully into your power, to move without hesitation, and to prioritize yourself without guilt. That shift changed everything in the dynamic, leaving them scrambling to confront a reality they had always tried to deny. They need you. Let them figure out life on their own. 12th, their drama became background noise in your evolution. It no longer defined your reality. Their chaos dominated your attention. Every argument, manipulation, and unpredictable move felt urgent, unavoidable, and exhausting. You reacted, adapted, and invested yourself in navigating their storms, believing that managing their emotions or controlling the fallout was your responsibility. For a long time, their world felt like it was the axis on which yours turned. You carried the weight, often without recognition or gratitude. As you began to grow, something inside you shifted. The more you focused on your own path, goals, and self-development, the less their drama disrupted you. What once seemed urgent and overwhelming began to fade into the periphery. Their fights, manipulations, and attempts to provoke you no longer dictated your emotional state. You realized that their chaos wasn't yours to fix, and that your energy was too valuable to spend on patterns that never served you. This detachment wasn't cruelty, apathy, or arrogance. It was a natural evolution. Your frequency changed. You became aligned with your growth, clarity, and priorities. Their noise, once deafening, became nothing more than background static, something you could notice if you wanted but no longer needed to respond to. The drama no longer dictated your decisions, moods, or focus. In that shift, your power grew. The very people who tried to control you with chaos were now irrelevant to the pace and direction of your life. You weren't reacting because you were stronger. You were reacting because you understood that their need for attention, validation, or disruption didn't require your energy. By letting their drama recede, you reclaimed your peace. You cultivated an environment where growth, clarity, and purpose dictated your responses, not manipulation or theatrics. Their chaos continued, but you no longer carried it. It became a reminder that evolution often requires detachment, not as punishment, but as liberation. That drama is their story, not yours. 13th, you noticed that their respect only came after you stopped caring. It was conditional, not freely given. You poured yourself into proving your value, bending over backwards to meet their expectations, defending your choices, and showing up even when it was inconvenient. Every word, gesture, and ounce of energy was an investment, yet it never earned acknowledgement or appreciation. They acted as if your presence, effort, and loyalty were constants they could rely on without consequence. No matter how much you gave, it was never enough, and no matter how much you tried, their recognition never arrived. Then something changed. You stopped giving. You stopped pouring energy into earning their approval. You stopped negotiating for their acknowledgement. You stopped bending to their whims or seeking validation. Their tune changed. The same people who dismissed, ignored, or minimized you began to act as if your worth had always been obvious. They offered the respect you had begged for now that it could no longer be taken for granted. The irony was laughable. The recognition you had chased became meaningless because by the time it arrived, you had moved beyond needing it. You had built your sense of self outside of their approval, established boundaries, and found your own validation. What they mistook for detachment was actually growth, a refusal to be held hostage by people who only valued you when you were distant. That lesson was profound. Respect isn't something you earn by trying harder for the wrong people. True respect comes when others see you as independent, untouchable by their manipulation, and unwilling to compromise your integrity for their comfort. You no longer wasted energy seeking validation from those who could never give it freely. By stepping back, ceasing to care about their approval, you forced a revelation: your value was never theirs to decide. By then, the respect they offered didn't change your trajectory, affect your self-worth, and didn't matter because you had claimed it for yourself. Finally, they learned, didn't they? 14th, you understood that freedom feels better than being understood. It's liberating to let go of the need to explain yourself. For years, you tried to make sense to them, to explain your actions, choices, and feelings, hoping that clarity would earn their approval or acknowledgement. You sought vindication, validation, and recognition, believing that being seen clearly would make the struggle worthwhile. They remained committed to misunderstanding you. They interpreted your words through their own agenda, dismissed your perspective, and held tight to their misconceptions. The exhaustion of trying to be understood became unbearable. You realized that constantly defending yourself wasn't empowering. It was draining. Every argument, explanation, and attempt at clarification was just another layer of bondage, another chain keeping you tethered to their judgment. That's when the shift happened. You stopped fighting to be seen, justified, or validated. You stopped letting their opinions dictate your emotions or actions. Letting go of their perception was liberating. The real "I don't give a damn" moment came when freedom became more valuable than recognition. The weight lifted, the tension eased, and the need for their understanding seemed trivial. You could exist without their approval, move without their consent, and thrive without their interference. That detachment wasn't apathy. It was self-preservation and clarity. You had reclaimed control over your life, energy, and emotions, and nothing they could say or do could touch that. By prioritizing freedom, you transcended the power they held. Their criticisms, misconceptions, and manipulations lost significance. You no longer needed apologies, explanations, or attempts at reconciliation to feel whole. Your independence became your strength, and the space you created allowed your energy, focus, and growth to flourish. Freedom proved more satisfying than being justified or understood by people who were never willing to see the truth. That realization marked the pinnacle of detachment, the point where caring for yourself outweighed the need to be validated. The real power, the real peace finally became yours. This is your truth, isn't it? In the end, this journey isn't about being cold or uncaring. It's about awakening to the truth of your own power. You stopped explaining because they weren't listening, and in doing so, you reclaimed your voice. You realized their approval was never yours to earn, their perception of love was performative, and their respect only mattered once you stopped seeking it. You understood that loyalty abused becomes distance pleasing them starves your soul, and selective investment is the cornerstone of survival. You saw their games, manipulations, and shifting truths for what they were, patterns built to control you. You chose detachment over exploitation and freedom over validation. Every moment of their chaos now drifts in the background, irrelevant to the evolution you've embraced. The moment you stopped bending, giving, and trying to make sense to people committed to misunderstanding you discovered the ultimate truth. Freedom feels better than being understood. That "I don't give a damn" energy, often misinterpreted as arrogance or coldness, is the mark of someone who has claimed their power, set boundaries, and refuses to surrender themselves to manipulation. Your detachment isn't absence, it's presence in your own life. Your silence isn't submission, it's sovereignty. Your refusal to bend, explain, or sacrifice for people who only exploit you is proof that you've grown beyond their reach. They are left scrambling, forced to confront the power they never truly had, while you move forward unshaken, whole, and unstoppable. This is more than survival, it's mastery and clarity. It's the assertion that your energy, soul, and peace are yours to protect, and no one else's approval can override that. The "I don't give a damn" talk isn't rebellion, it's triumph. You are living proof that boundaries, self-respect, and freedom are the ultimate weapons against manipulation, control, and exploitation. You didn't just detach, you rose. You didn't just stop caring, you evolved. And that evolution cannot be ignored. Did this message resonate with you? Does it feel like it was ripped from your own experience? Don't let it fade away. Join this conversation. Subscribe to this channel and be part of a community that celebrates growth, power, and freedom. Smash that like button if you're claiming your energy. Leave a comment. Share your story, your reaction, your aha moment. Share this with anyone who needs to know that detachment isn't weakness, it's strength. And their transformation starts today. Your support fuels this space for those ready to rise. Together we make the impossible undeniable. Take the next step. Subscribe now. Subscribe now. Subscribe now. Subscribe now. Subscribe now. Subscribe now. Welcome, dearly beloved, you rare and precious souls. One misstep can unravel destinies, but one insightful move can liberate you from ancestral chains. Did you know neuroscience reveals the human brain can process a decision in a startling 200 milliseconds, eclipsing the speed of conscious thought? Imagine then executing a maneuver so swift, so nuanced, so precisely calibrated that its impact remains unseen until the very foundation shift. Chosen one, you have orchestrated precisely that. More than just a choice, it was a spiritual pivot so stealthy it bypassed conventional awareness, yet so resonant it shattered centuries-old patterns. The adversary never heard the castle gates fall. They simply awoke to find their dominion in ruins, and somehow you had already vanished. They envisioned a chess game. Little did they suspect you were silently disconnecting the board from its power source. Today we will dissect the mechanics of your invisible revolution, illuminating how you dismantled every spiritual impediment with a single imperceptible action, rendering their structures irrevocably broken. Number 1. You transcended cycle breaking. You dissolved the blueprint. Mere resistance to recurring patterns is insufficient. You eradicated the very architecture upon which they were built. This subtle distinction often goes unnoticed. Many combat patterns by confronting them in their manifestations. However, as long as the original design persists, the pattern retains the potential for regeneration, like demolishing a house but preserving the architectural schematics. Inevitably, someone will rebuild according to the old plans. Your action possesses a permanence that eludes superficial resistance. You ventured to the genesis, into the unseen realm, and dismantled the structure, leaving nothing to reconstruct. Observe how individuals from your past are now struggling to replicate their former tactics. The emotional lures, the manipulative strategies, the familiar dramas that once ensnared you. They now encounter an unresponsive void. It's as if they are pressing buttons on a machine disconnected from power. Frustration mounts as their methods prove futile, leaving them bewildered. Their perception is that you have changed, but the truth extends far deeper. You have severed the foundation that provided their games with a space to exist. Breaking the cycle at its core eliminates the energetic alignment between you and the problem. Previously, an unspoken agreement, a subconscious harmony with the pattern facilitated its access to your life. Now that accord is nullified, the doorway bricked over. Even long-standing temptations now lack their previous allure. It is more than mere willpower. You have severed the pattern's oxygen supply. Rarely is the sheer exhaustion of this endeavor acknowledged. Navigating the deep hidden recesses where generational trauma and spiritual contracts reside is not glamorous. It demands an exceptional level of self-awareness and the courage to relinquish the familiar comfort of dysfunction. Segments of your identity had to perish to eradicate any resonance with the archaic blueprint. This ensures lasting transformation. You didn't just oppose the pattern, you evolved into an entity incapable of harboring it. The spiritual landscape around you is forever altered. The blueprint is irretrievably destroyed. Consequently, the shackles that bound others for decades can no longer claim you. Number 2. You strategically shifted the battlefield to an inaccessible dimension. This relocation has irrevocably altered the dynamic. Most conflicts repeat due to perpetual engagement on familiar grounds. The same emotional terrain, identical mental triggers, recurring points of attack. This represents the enemy's comfort zone. They are intimately acquainted with the landscape, its vulnerabilities, and the placement of traps. Continuing to engage in this arena necessitates fighting on their terms. You disrupted that agreement, refusing to engage in expected territories, elevating the conflict to an unattainable dimension. This is not about avoidance. It is about recalibrating the rules of engagement so dramatically that the opposition is rendered clueless. You transcended the emotional frequency where they could reach you. Their taunts, machinations, and manipulations are still projected, yet they fail to find their mark because you are no longer tuned in. It's analogous to forwarding mail from an abandoned address. They anticipate a reaction, a defense, a breakdown, yet encounter only silence because you are no longer present. This was a calculated shift born from understanding the principle that energy attracts its resonance. remaining within specific emotional states rendered you accessible. Therefore, you consciously elevated your spiritual and mental plane, focusing your intention, refining your responses, and refusing to participate in unproductive exchanges. The higher you ascended, the less receptive you became to previously effective tactics. Now the battlefield exists within your dominion. You operate from a position of clarity, tranquility, and strategic foresight, not chaos. This disorients them, as chaos was their primary weapon and defense. By refusing to engage on that terrain, you deprive them of both. The true power resides in this: when they are unable to reach you, they are forced to retreat or turn against each other, their customary power source severed. By relocating the battlefield, you have not only protected yourself but transformed their greatest advantage into a dead end. Number 3, you became the wild card the ancient patterns never factored in. You embody the unpredictable element, defying predetermined calculations. Spiritual and generational cycles endure through reliance on predictability. They anticipate consistent reactions to predictable pressures. They rely on consistent manifestations of fear, pride, and pain, leading to predictable, destructive choices. The cycle persists by assuming subsequent individuals will adhere to the familiar script, often unconsciously. You disrupted that. You deviated from the expected sequence. Where the pattern predicted anger, you demonstrated composure. Where it expected capitulation, you persisted. Where it anticipated seeking approval, you withdrew. You became the unpredictable element, disrupting the formula. The pattern cannot adjust rapidly enough because its power is rooted in repetition, not adaptation. This transformation occurred amidst adversity. Your awareness shifted. You perceived each situation as an attempt to enforce a predetermined outcome. You anticipated the setup before its climax. Instead of complying, you dismantled the chain link by link. Patterns cannot withstand scrutiny. They thrive in the subconscious among those who react instinctively. Consciously observing the moves made against you shatters the illusion that this is simply how things are. You transitioned from being a pawn to being the player, surveying the entire board. Being the variable empowers you to dismantle the pattern not only in your life but also in the lives of those connected to you. Once you demonstrate the script's malleability, the curse is exposed as conditional. Others may persist, but they can no longer claim inevitability, for you have shattered the illusion. You demonstrated that one divergent choice nullifies the equation. The pattern realizes its dominion is broken and it ceases to exist. Number 4, you neutralize the trigger words embedded in your lineage. Some families harbor patterns so deeply ingrained that a single word, accusation, or scenario can unleash generations of suppressed anger, shame, or discord. These are spiritual tripwires, programmed buttons designed to elicit reactions. These can manifest as certain topics, invariably sparking arguments, phrases inflicting immediate wounds, or specific periods consistently marred by strife. For years, these triggers functioned flawlessly because no one contemplated disarming them. Everyone blindly stumbled into the trap, accepting it as inevitable. You disrupted this pattern quietly, without fanfare. You observed the patterns, recognized the emotional setup, and consciously decided to cease taking the bait. This was not easy, as those triggers are designed to feel personal, compelling you to defend, attack, or succumb to guilt. Instead, you remained steadfast. Instead of mirroring the energy projected toward you, you allowed it to pass unimpeded. Initially, those around you were unsettled, expecting the typical explosion. The ensuing silence was alien, but that was the objective. Without the predictable reaction, the cycle collapses. A trigger only possesses power if it elicits a response. By refusing to engage, you sever the connection. This transformation transcends suppressing feelings. It involves rewiring your internal response so that those stimuli no longer trigger the old emotional state. You didn't just cease reacting. You eradicated the part of you that could be provoked. Those tripwires are now impotent. They have lost their power over you and the future for a single individual in a bloodline. Mastering emotional equilibrium renders that weapon useless forever. You have ensured its non-transmission. The game concludes, yet its ending remains obscure to them. Number 5. You recalibrated your spirit to disregard ancient summons. There's a reason some struggles feel less like mistakes and more like a compelling force, drawing you back into familiar troubles. These are not mere habits, but spiritual summons designed to lure you towards cycles you seek to escape. They can manifest as sudden urges, temptations, or coincidences conspiring to return you to square one. Most remain oblivious to this deeper influence, succumbing to the pull. You severed that connection by shifting your frequency, not merely instructing yourself to resist, but by realigning the spiritual channel upon which you operate. Imagine having your number removed from a list plaguing your lineage. The line still exists, the calls still persist, yet you are deaf to them. This is the culmination of profound inner work, reprogramming your spiritual responses. This transcends willpower, which can still perceive the summons while attempting to resist. You distanced yourself from the signal's range, addressing the root causes granting access in the first place. Unhealed wounds, unresolved agreements, subconscious attraction to harm. You broke the implicit contracts, enabling the patterns to beckon you back. Now the lure evokes no reaction, curiosity, or spark. The chain is broken, the hook unable to find purchase because you no longer desire what is offered. This confounds those who once easily manipulated you. They employ the same bait words and setups, yet you remain unmoved. The liberation extends beyond your own freedom, ensuring that the summons will not resonate in future stages of your life. By removing your frequency from the signal's range, you ensure it remains silent. The voice may shout, but it will remain perpetually inaudible. Number 6. You transcended the curse's expiration date. Some spiritual patterns are finite. They have a life cycle. Survival depends on renewal through subsequent generations. This perpetuates familial struggles. The curse is not immortal, but continually sustained through choices, agreements, or unhealed wounds that serve as its sustenance. It anticipates each generation succumbing, allowing the cycle to resume. You defied that expectation, progressing beyond its peak influence. For some, the tipping point is age. For others, intense hardship revealing the curse's weight. You reached a stage where others before you capitulated, fragmented, or repeated a pattern. You persevered, preventing the curse from refreshing through you. This was not merely physical survival, but emotional and spiritual resilience. You traversed the landscape without permitting bitterness, addiction, violence, or self-destruction to take root, preventing the transfer. Curses require consent, often unknowingly granted through perpetuating old reactions. You denied that agreement, closing the gate. The curse is now stranded, thwarted by history's failure to repeat. You surpassed its influence, preventing it from leaping forward. You did not transmit it to your children, relationships, or community, starving it of its lifeblood, a willing host. Your life may feel lighter now. Even amidst imperfections, the invisible pressure is gone. You have outlived its reign, preventing it from influencing the future. You broke its chain by refusing to fall before its expiration, now permanently extinguished. Number 7, you refuse to play the villain in their script. Cycles endure because of the willingness to assume assigned roles. Dysfunctional families, broken relationships, and spiritual battles adhere to unspoken scripts. You were expected to be the villain, losing control, making errors, or uttering incriminating words. They needed that version to perpetuate the pattern and their narrative. You disrupted this by refusing to conform, no matter the provocation. They attempted to bait you with insults, traps, and recreations of familiar situations to validate their perception. You withheld the necessary reaction, refusing to deliver the lines assigned to you. This wasn't about feigning virtue, but about genuine inner transformation, deflecting their attacks. When they attempted to target the old you, they found only absence, collapsing their performance. Rehearsed arguments lacked an opponent. Scenes intended for repetition found no energy source. The more you refused to perform, the more awkward and hollow their script. Certain individuals and patterns can only exist if you adopt a certain persona. By refusing that role, you deprive them of the plot. You don't just ruin the scene, you end the story. That collapse offers two options: confronting their dysfunction or seeking a replacement. You rewrote your role to the point where continued drama became impossible. You rejected the part, burned the costume, erased the lines, and exited the stage entirely. Without your cooperation, the play ground to a halt. Number 8. You deciphered the language of patterns and then spoke in silence. Patterns have a language. This comprises cues, tones, attitudes, and maneuvers triggering specific reactions. Understanding this language reveals the scripted nature of conflicts, manipulations, and historical recurrences. Specific words or behaviors function as code, unlocking anger, fear, guilt, or compliance. For most of your life, you responded unknowingly. Eventually, you discerned the underlying pattern. You observed recurring emotional hooks, recognizing bait in tonal nuances and discerning insincere apologies as invitations back into the loop. Understanding the structure provided a choice: perpetuate the pattern through continued response, or cease speaking its language entirely. You chose silence, not stemming from fear or avoidance, but from deliberate calculation. Each refusal to respond was a message: this code is invalid. That lack of reaction wasn't emptiness, but a complete shutdown of the pattern's communication. Without your response, the loop lacked fuel. You weren't just biting your tongue, but severing the connection at its roots. true silence in the face of a pattern isn't about pretending to be unaffected, but genuinely disconnecting from the need to engage. The urge to defend, explain, or retaliate was no longer present. A pattern without a language is powerless. If it can't elicit the expected response, it loses leverage. This disruptive silence wasn't weakness, but fluency. You learned the system so effectively that you could dismantle it without a word. In the end, your quiet terminated conversations and the control those conversations once held over your life. Number 9, you severed the energy source sustaining it. Some patterns are parasitic. They are not self-sustaining, but require a constant influx of emotional energy. Fear, outrage, guilt, or the need for understanding. As long as you reacted, it lived. The moment you stopped, it started dying. Parasitic patterns convince you that your reaction is vital. They compel you to defend, explain, or offer a response. Each engagement, even when intending to stand your ground, nourishes it. You were unknowingly sustaining it. You broke this by severing the energy supply. You ceased explaining yourself to those uninterested in understanding. You stopped letting fear dictate your actions. You stopped freely giving away your outrage. Without the desired emotional involvement, the pattern withered. It did not die dramatically or announce its demise, but faded quietly, weakening until its absence became apparent. The individuals or forces behind it may persist, but their tactics are hollow without your energy. They are incapable of eliciting the same reaction, rendering them powerless. This required detachment, not warfare. By controlling the flow of your energy, you gained control. A parasitic pattern cannot regenerate without a host. You did not weaken it temporarily, but severed its lifeline permanently. They were too late. The parasite was already dead, and you had already moved on. They sought a fight, but the power was gone. Number 10, you disrupted their spiritual economy. Some patterns function as a black market. There is constant exchange of emotions, power, and influence. Pain trades for control. Shame trades for silence. Fear trades for compliance. Each concession fuels their system. You broke that by refusing to participate. You stopped reciprocating their manipulation with pain, accepting shame as the price of peace, or letting fear dictate your decisions. This wasn't just walking away. It was shutting down the market by devaluing their currency. Their economy thrives on predictability, knowing how to elicit your reaction. They stir up conflict to harvest anger, or press on wounds to make you cave. By refusing the transaction, you eliminate their ability to gain anything. The bait remains dangled, the invoice unpaid. Their system collapsed. A spiritual economy cannot survive without participants. So to recap, what we've explored today is nothing short of a spiritual revolution orchestrated with such profound insight and subtle action that you've dismantled patterns holding you back, rewriting your destiny in the process. It's about understanding the deep mechanics of these cycles, recognizing the battlefields, the language, the energy sources, and ultimately reclaiming your power by refusing to participate in the old scripts. You've become the architect of your own freedom, breaking ancestral chains and forging a new path forward, not just for yourself, but potentially for generations to come. I truly hope this has resonated with you, sparked some insights, or even just given you a new way of looking at challenges you might be facing. I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts. What resonated most with you? Do you have any questions about any of these 10 points? Or maybe you've experienced something similar in your own life. Please share your comments and let's get a conversation going. And if you found this helpful, inspiring, or just plain interesting, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future explorations into topics like this. We'll be diving deeper into strategies for personal growth and transformation, and I wouldn't want you to miss out, Welcome the awakened. A truth suppressed for too long becomes a confession bargaining for relevance. Chosen ones heed this warning. This is not mere entertainment. We delve into the kind of truth that doesn't soothe. It violently exposes the raw, festering depths of deception. Psychological studies reveal that truth often emerges not from genuine remorse, but from the unbearable weight of a lie threatening to collapse. And in this scenario, the pressure is reaching critical mass. There exists an individual harboring information so potent, so condemning, that they are facing intense pressure to confess. But consider this, their motivation is not to liberate you, but to salvage themselves. Ironically, they cling to the illusion that belated honesty will somehow bestow nobility upon them. Such naivete is astounding. Journey with me as we dissect why this delayed truth cannot redeem them and how its timing irrevocably taints their attempted atonement. This transcends mere gossip. It's witnessing a futile attempt to extinguish a raging inferno with bare hands. First, their pleas are not for justice, but for a compromise. They are not begging for justice. They are begging for a compromise. This is paramount. After years of concealing the truth, their sudden urge to speak stems not from a moral awakening, but from the realization that silence no longer serves their interests. At this juncture, their priority is not clearing your name, mending broken hearts, or rectifying past wrongs. It's about damage containment primarily for themselves. Their pleas are not a sign of choosing the righteous path. They signify a desperate negotiation to dictate the terms of truth's revelation. They seek to control the narrative's tempo, tone, and framing, thereby mitigating the impact on their own image. Confessing before external exposure, they believe, allows them to spin the narrative, portraying themselves as reluctant heroes instead of willing accomplices. They desire accolades for belatedly doing right without enduring the consequences of their initial wrongdoing. Reaching this stage, they treat truth as a commodity, attempting to trade it for leniency, reduced penalties, and even sympathy. Strategic manipulation of words ensues, revealing just enough to feign bravery while concealing enough to safeguard their reputation. They rationalize it as honesty, but it's merely a bargain masked as confession. While outsiders oblivious to the complete picture might be deceived, you, the one who has endured the devastation, cannot be fooled. The irony lies in the non-existence of the sought-after bargain. They believe timing the truth will shield them from the repercussions. However, delayed truth equates to shattered trust. By waiting until the pressure is overwhelming, they demonstrate that truth was never their guiding principle. Survival was. This revelation is irreversible. Therefore, when they are pressured to reveal the truth, recognize that it's not to rescue you from falsehoods. It's to shield themselves from the full consequences of exposure. Some transgressions defy negotiation, and this is one of them. Second, the truth they hold cannot undo the damage, it can only illuminate it. That's the stark reality many are unwilling to confront. After prolonged concealment, they often believe that confessing will act as a reset button. But life defies such simplistic solutions. Words may acknowledge events, but they cannot rewind time. They cannot erase pain, rebuild trust, or reverse the cascading effects of secret choices. Once damage is inflicted, truth does not heal. It merely exposes the depth and intent of the wound. The revelation won't magically erase scars. Instead, it will confirm long-held suspicions the harm was not accidental, and it persisted due to deliberate silence. They desperately avoid contemplating this. They desire recognition for courageously confessing. But the confession actually reveals their willingness to perpetuate the lie. It exposes their priorities, their alliances, and your well-being's absence from their list. This imparts a profound weight to delayed truth. It arrives not with the freshness of honesty, but with the burden of delay. That delay fundamentally alters everything. The truth transforms into evidence, not restoration. It's proof of their passive observation as the damage unfolded. The longer the lie persisted, the more deeply rooted and widespread its impact became. Consequently, their confession won't be a moment of redemption, but a moment of revelation. Not about the events themselves, but about their true character. We often forget that delayed truth can be as damning as permanent silence because the harm is irrevocably embedded, defying any confessional rewriting of history. Ultimately, their truth will save no one, least of all themselves. It will merely validate what has already been lived, amplifying the deafening silence of their past lies. Third, their motivation is not compassion. It's fear of another's revelation. Their motivation is not compassion. It's fear of another's revelation. That is the true catalyst behind their sudden pursuit of righteousness. For an extended period, silence was their most potent weapon, maintaining control, shielding them from accountability, and allowing them to shape the narrative. But circumstances have changed. Someone else possesses the same truth, perhaps even a more complete version. This knowledge transforms their silence into a ticking time bomb. They speak not from a newfound conscience or guilt, but because they no longer monopolize the narrative. Realizing that another could expose them without their carefully crafted spin, panic ensues. They strive to preemptively confess, controlling the truth's impact. By confessing first, they aim to set the tone, soften the blow, and appear as though they always lean towards honesty. This renders their confession hollow. It's not bravery, but strategy. It's not a moral stand, but a race against time. Their intent is to control the narrative, not to aid you. They know that another's truth emerges unfiltered. Their version allows cropping, polishing, and emotional manipulation, portraying themselves as victims of circumstance instead of architects of harm. This timing exposes everything. People sense when truth is driven by self-preservation, not integrity. The tone and energy differ, feeling rehearsed and calculated. Trying to preempt another's revelation reveals their initial intent to remain silent. Ultimately, this isn't an act of compassion. It's a defensive maneuver by someone realizing that truth beyond their control strips them of all power, a prospect they dread. Fourth, they hope truth offers a shortcut to forgiveness. They hope truth offers a shortcut to forgiveness, as if confession automatically clears the slate. In their minds, admitting wrongdoing is a grand gesture, a magic key unlocking compassion and closing the book. They view truth as a transaction, honesty given, forgiveness received. They fail to realize that forgiveness, particularly after deep betrayal, stems from changed behavior. Genuine remorse and a willingness to make amends, none of which can be faked long. Herein lies their miscalculation. They believe that confessing is the challenge when it's the easiest thing at this point. The real work involves consistent action, rebuilding trust and preventing repeated patterns. But that requires humility and time, both of which they avoid. They seek instant relief, forgiveness without earning it. They underestimate you, assuming you remain where they left you, vulnerable, doubting, seeking closure. They believe their confession will be like water in a desert, welcomed unconditionally. They fail to see that you've weathered the storm, survived, and rebuilt without their aid. You no longer crave their truth, having learned to live without it. When no longer desperate manipulation becomes obvious. Therefore, truth without transformation is dangerous, becoming another tool for control. They present themselves as brave souls who confessed while avoiding responsibility for their actions' aftermath. Their confession spins as a moral victory, concealing self-interest. While they hope truth fast-tracks forgiveness, they demonstrate minimal change. Anyone grasping the weight of their actions knows that truth is not the end, but the beginning of proving their transformation. Fifth, the confession will be crafted, not complete. The confession will be crafted, not complete. Prepare for this. Prolonged concealment prevents spontaneous, unfiltered honesty. They rehearse, revise, and reshape the story to minimize self-destruction. The version they provide minimizes their cost, not maximizes revelation. They frame words like artwork detailing areas portraying remorse, confusion, or victimization. Parts showing deliberate harm, calculated betrayal, or pure self-interest will be cropped. They label it truth because it contains selected pieces chosen precisely. The messiest, ugliest details remain concealed. They sprinkle self-incrimination to appear authentic. This is an age-old trick. Admit minor faults to appear transparent while concealing the main offense. They seek credit for transparency without full exposure. Complete lies are less deceptive than partial truth. Gaps in presented fragments prompt your mind to fill them. Trusting them, you might fill those gaps with assumptions that favor them, which is their intention. They present their confession as a brave and selfless act engineered for appearances. It's not a raw canvas, but a curated snapshot of effort, remorse, and honesty, protecting elements that would alter your perception of them forever. They hope you remain unaware of what's missing. Sixth, they don't want to clear your name, they want to clear their conscience. They don't want to clear your name, they want to clear their conscience. This distinction is often missed. Ostensibly, they step up to defend you, correct the record, and undo the damage caused by their silence or lies. But their true mission is self-relief, not justice for you. Prolonged concealment creates a heavy weight on the soul. Eventually, they prioritize their own feelings over your suffering. Revealing the truth becomes a selfish form of redemption. They justify their actions without addressing their delay. When they finally speak, they expect recognition for their bravery, as if this single act erases years of accumulated damage. Their motive is not restoring your reputation, but restoring their own peace. Their version of truth often carries an air of self-congratulation. They want recognition for stepping in when it mattered, although it only mattered to them once they felt the consequences of their silence. Their confession is not a gift, but an emotional offloading. They dump the truth at your feet, relieving their burden while leaving you to deal with the shock, hurt, and renewed fallout. This self-serving honesty often worsens the situation. One senses when something is said for the speaker's benefit, not the listener's. The tone differs, the timing is suspicious, and the delivery feels hollow. It's not about lifting you up, but removing their guilt. The world might see courage, but you'll know better. Speaking when silence becomes unbearable for the speaker is not courage. True courage would have been telling the truth when it could have spared you harm. This is conscience clearing disguised as heroism. Seventh, they're only speaking because silence has become dangerous. They're only speaking because silence has become dangerous. As long as their silence benefited them, protecting their image, shielding them from blame, and maintaining their standing, they adhered to it without hesitation. It wasn't loyalty, morality, or strategy back then. It was convenience. Silence was easy when it kept them safe and comfortable. Now the balance has shifted. The same silence that favored them has begun to work against them. Whispers might be circulating, or someone else might be close to revealing the same truth. Circumstances might have changed, making their silence look suspicious. Whatever the trigger, the reality is this: they're not speaking because it's right. They're speaking because it's safer for themselves. Their performance begins. They frame their sudden honesty as a moral awakening, claiming they could no longer live with themselves. But they lived with themselves until the risk of silence outweighed the risk of speaking. Now that silence could cost them relationships, opportunities, or freedom, confessing is the smarter move. It's a survival tactic disguised as virtue. They calculate that speaking allows them to control the narrative, appear cooperative, and perhaps even gain sympathy. Tragically, some will believe it. Outsiders will see bravery, but you'll recognize it as the next move in their self-preservation game. The danger lies in mistaking their timing for sincerity. Sincerity is about motive, not just action. When the motive is self-protection instead of truth, their words stem from fear, not courage. It's not about doing what's right, but doing what's necessary to save themselves, which is fundamentally different. Eighth, they're underestimating how much you already know. They're underestimating how much you already know. They believe they're about to drop a bombshell, something so huge and dramatic that it will leave you stunned. They've probably rehearsed the moment, imagining your disbelief as they reveal the truth. But you've lived in the wreckage of their actions for too long to be clueless. You've pieced together the puzzle they think they're about to hand you. You've collected the pieces quietly without their help. Patterns reveal themselves. Lies contradict. Behaviors repeat. Small slip-ups connect like dots, clarifying the picture. You might lack their full confession, but you have enough to know what happened. In some ways, your version is sharper based on what they tried to hide, not what they chose to tell. They can't grasp this. They think they control the information, but their damage has already spoken. Your understanding stems from lived experience, which strips away illusions. So when they finally speak, expecting you to unravel under the weight of their truth, they'll encounter something unexpected: calm. Not because it doesn't matter, but because you've adapted your life to the reality they're just admitting. Their big reveal feels like a rerun. This is the danger of underestimating someone who survived in the dark. They become experts at seeing without being told. They think they're narrators, but they're confirming what you already know, which won't give them the power they hoped for. It will only highlight how late and insignificant their words are. Ninth, they're trying to control the narrative one last time. They're trying to control the narrative one last time. Even while claiming to confess, they manipulate the story. They lace their confession with strategic omissions, distortions, and emotional triggers to make you see them favorably. Instead of raw truth, they rearrange move events, tweak timelines, and blur details to obscure their ugliest actions. One tactic involves planting seeds of doubt, questioning your memory of events, implying flaws or misunderstandings. This isn't clearing the air, but clouding it for concealment. They also slip in emotional bait, hoping for sympathy, playing up their hardships, pressure, or struggles with silence. It's a performance, recasting themselves as reluctant participants instead of betrayers. They frame their role as complicated, conflicted, even noble. They turn clear betrayal into a muddied dilemma, hiding in blurred lines. These tactics expose them more than they protect them. The need to reshape the narrative shows that control, not truth, accountability, or your healing was always their priority. Seeing this, their confession becomes less about closure and more about watching them cling to their lost image. 10th, the truth will cost them more than the lie ever did. The truth will cost them more than the lie ever did. For years, they've lived under the protection of silence, avoiding the weight of their actions. The lie allowed them to maintain relationships, their image, and their standing. It was their safety net, shield, and control. The moment the real story emerges, that shield shatters. The cost of truth is rarely private. It's public, messy, and irreversible. The lie might have chipped at their conscience, but the truth will devastate their reputation. Trusted people will see them differently. Supporters will feel betrayed not just by what they did, but by how long they concealed it. Friends may become critics, allies may become strangers, and their carefully crafted image will collapse. Loss won't end with relationships. Opportunities will vanish. Invitations will cease. Once accessible rooms will close. Some may forgive, but they will never forget. The weight of the truth will reshape their world permanently. So to bring it all together, the core message here isn't about whether truth is good or bad. It's about recognizing the source of that truth, especially when it's been deliberately withheld. It's a call to look beyond the surface of a belated confession and understand the self-serving motivations that often drive it. It's about empowering ourselves to see through the manipulation and reclaim our narrative regardless of when or even if someone else decides to finally speak up. Ultimately, it is about recognizing that their confession is about their peace, not necessarily yours. I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on this. Have you ever experienced something like this firsthand? What are your personal insights into navigating delayed truths and self-serving confessions? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your stories, your questions, or even just join in on the discussion. And if this resonated with you, if it gave you a new way to think about things, please hit that subscribe button. I'm planning on exploring more topics like this, delving into the complexities of human behavior and the power of self-awareness. Don't miss out on future videos. Thanks for watching. Ding, ding, ding. Welcome the awakened ones. Tread carefully with the perceived oddities in your midst, for the strange one might just hold the key to unlocking your next major breakthrough. Isn't it ironic how fortunes shift? One moment you're the enigma whispered about over mimosas, the next, the very essence of your being becomes an object of secret fascination. Your words are suddenly revered as gospel, your nuances mimicked as the latest vogue. The individual once overlooked is now the focus of rapt, silent observation. Here's the kicker: psychological research reveals that both admiration and envy ignite remarkably similar neural pathways. Meaning some of your fiercest detractors may simply be admirers in a state of confused disguise. Yes, really, the critic who once scoffed is now meticulously studying your evolution, captivated as if by a can't-miss series on their favorite streaming service. And the secret: you haven't drastically changed. You simply decided to stop minimizing yourself. But here's the unexpected: your quest wasn't for mere followers. You were focused on healing, growing, and embodying authenticity in a world saturated with pretense. That's the magnet. That's the reason they're transfixed. And the most astonishing part: the secret admirer might be the last soul you'd anticipate, the former supervisor who underestimated your potential, the ex who claimed indifference, the vanished friend, or perhaps even the person who once deemed you too intense, now finding enlightenment in your past social media captions. Prepare yourselves, because today we're delving into the depths of your newfound magnetism, identifying your hidden admirers and exploring why their applause resonates with a particular intensity when it originates from unexpected sources. Let's unpack it all. First, your radiance is a phoenix born from ashes, and that's what compels them. They're drawn to your luminosity, but they remain oblivious to the trials required to ignite it. The qualities most admired in you today, your fortitude, your tranquility, your vibrant energy, aren't innate endowments. They're the product of relentless construction from the ruins. This version of yourself is not a result of mere chance. You were forged in the fires of transformation, countless episodes of dismantling, reconstruction, vulnerability, periods of introspection, and an unwavering resolve to persist. They witness your brilliance unaware of the crucible from which it emerged. The majority perceive transformations as superficial, but yours was profoundly spiritual. You exude a different kind of radiance because you've undergone deep healing. You overcame unspeakable challenges, and instead of succumbing to bitterness, you turned inward. You blossomed. And that is what they perceive. It's not merely about aesthetic enhancements. It's not solely your magnetic aura. It's the palpable essence of someone who has experienced emotional, mental, and even spiritual rebirth. Such profound metamorphosis cannot be fabricated, purchased, or instructed. It is earned through experience and profoundly felt. That's why their gaze remains fixated. Even if unacknowledged, they sense a distinct energy surrounding you. It's a blend of reverence and puzzlement. How can someone who has endured so much emanate such serenity? How can you be both gentle and unyielding, compassionate, yet astute enough to discern deception? You don't project victimhood. You exude triumph, but a subtle form, the kind that requires no declaration. The kind that speaks volumes through posture, boundaries, stillness, and presence. And now they gravitate towards you not only for your accomplishments, but for the journey of attaining them. You didn't resort to fanfare, grandiosity, or superficiality. You embraced authenticity. And in a world overflowing with counterfeit confidence masquerading as healing, you became the genuine embodiment of it. That's the reason for the rise in admiration. That's why former detractors are now observing with wide eyes and hushed awe. You transmuted your pain into presence. You transformed your ashes into a source of light. And now those who once dismissed you cannot avert their gaze. Second, their curiosity transcends casual interest. It reflects a yearning for spiritual fulfillment. Their attention isn't incidental or superficial. It's a deep-seated spiritual hunger. There's an element within you that awakens something within them, something they've been unconsciously seeking. Your manner of speaking deviates from convention. Your demeanor is distinct. You emanate purpose, tranquility, and an inner sense of conviction. And that's what has them spellbound. People are starved for authenticity. They've been saturated with manufactured connections, fabricated influencers, contrived strength, and hollow encouragement. But encountering you sparks a fundamental shift. Your presence feels different. You transcend the role of a mere voice online or another face in the crowd. You embody substance. There's truth in your essence. You seek not to impress, and that's precisely what captivates them. You have no need for validation because you possess an unwavering sense of self. And that self-awareness resonates with the part of them that feels adrift, uncertain, or unmoored. They don't simply admire your strength. They crave your clarity. They yearn to comprehend your understanding. They long to experience your sensations. It's as though you've unlocked a long-locked door and they're quietly hoping you'll grant them access. That's why someone unexpected is observing so intently. Perhaps they lack conscious awareness, but their soul knows. Their soul resonates with your vibrational frequency even if their rational mind lags behind. That's the essence of awakened souls. Your very existence challenges others not intentionally, but because you mirror the potential they've suppressed within themselves. When they perceive you, they glimpse their potential. If they were to relinquish pretense, cease performing, and initiate their healing journey, you are neither celebrated nor ostentatious. You lack the polished facade the world demands. But you are genuine, and genuine is a rare commodity. This rarity is what attracts them. They aren't merely admiring a person, they are responding to a frequency, and that frequency, that's truth, that's purpose, that's divine energy flowing through you. They may not entirely grasp their feelings, but they are certain they wish to continue experiencing them. Third, the one scrutinizing you secretly is frequently the one who publicly ridiculed you. The very individual now admiring you likely mocked you behind your back, and that is what renders it so surreal. They once dismissed your aspirations, mocked your unconventionality, and harbored the secret desire for your downfall. But now they observe you in silent awe, their eyes wide, because the person they disparaged is surpassing every limitation they imposed upon you. Their admiration is genuine. However, they will never confess it aloud, because acknowledgement would necessitate admitting their misjudgment, and their ego cannot bear that burden. Their unforeseen element was growth, an extraordinary transformation that defies explanation. You defied their script. You didn't succumb to bitterness. You refused to remain confined to the role they assigned you. You underwent a metamorphosis. Your evolution evokes unease within them, forcing them to confront the truth. They operated from a foundation of pride, fear, and ignorance. While you remained focused on your path, quietly elevating yourself, they grapple with the transformation of the one they once mocked into someone they now secretly admire. You embodied everything they declared you could never be. And now they are the ones with silent notifications enabled for your updates. They meticulously analyze your words, attempting to emulate your delivery, seeking to decipher your method of achieving success without seeking validation or conforming. They never envisioned you as an influencer, and now they find themselves inescapably influenced. The twist lies in their inherent goodness. They merely lacked the breadth of vision to perceive your greatness at the time. You intimidated them because you possessed an indefinable quality. You evoked a sense of vulnerability within them, not intentionally, but because your authenticity rendered their masks uncomfortable, prompting them to react with sarcasm and derision. That served as their defense mechanism. However, having risen above it all, they cannot refute what they observe: an exceptional individual refined by adversity, a chosen soul. Their silence is not indicative of ignorance. It represents reflection. They acknowledge their past actions, and now they recognize your true essence. Therefore, the existence of a secret admirer should not surprise you. They used to mock your journey, but now they scrutinize your every move as if it were a map to their own breakthrough. Fourth, you awakened something dormant within them. You did more than impress, you disrupted. Your presence wasn't solely for entertainment or gaining affection, but it resonated on a deeper level. It stirred a part of them they had buried under layers of performance anxiety and mistaken identity. You made no ostentatious displays. You imposed nothing, yet merely by embodying your authentic self, something within them was activated. A dormant light was ignited. You didn't inspire admiration, you catalyzed an awakening. They saw you and began questioning long-held beliefs. They pondered why they were leading a life characterized by falseness, heaviness, or disconnection. Why their confidence felt artificial, why their peace remained ephemeral. Your presence in the room inadvertently challenged their fundamental assumptions regarding strength, worth, and identity, and it shook them to their core. You possess a rare quality not in appearance, but in your very essence. A profound sense of alignment emanates from within you. You know who you are. You have weathered the storm, and it manifests not in scars, but in your tranquility. That energy doesn't merely attract, it transforms, it challenges them without uttering a word. They begin rethinking everything. Their speech, their self-presentation, their private conduct, all because they encountered you. This transcends ego or praise. It's about purpose. Your energy carries truth, and truth invariably shatters illusions. You awakened something dormant within them. You reminded them of a forgotten aspect of themselves, an honest, audacious, untainted version, the one that existed before life hardened them, before fear prompted them to shrink, before shame compelled them to feign. And now they are unsettled in the most beneficial way. They are taciturn in your presence because they are engaged in introspection. They are observing you not because you are flamboyant, but because you awaken something within them. You aren't their role model, you are their mirror. And in seeing you, they recognized their potential before the world intervened. Fifth, you're living proof that mystique still thrives in a shallow world. You didn't adhere to the prescribed rules, you didn't pursue attention or seek recognition. While others were preoccupied with posting, proving, and performing, you remained focused on your path. You navigated life with quiet resolve, healed privately, and allowed your growth to unfold organically, and that has rendered you something rare, an enigma. In a society where individuals overshare for validation and sacrifice authenticity for applause, you emerged as someone who didn't require ostentation to be noticed. That quietude is magnetic. People struggle to decipher you, and that's the reason they're drawn to you. You don't provide easy solutions. You defy categorization. They struggle to determine whether you're serene or formidable, gentle or resilient, reserved or calculating, and that tension draws them back. You're the person they scroll past repeatedly only to return because something about you resonates, something about you lingers. In reality, your mystique isn't a calculated strategy. It's the byproduct of genuine healing. You didn't cease speaking to appear profound. You ceased speaking because you discovered the power held within silence. You allowed people to assume, speculate, project, and you continued building, and now the very individuals who once disregarded your presence are consumed by the fact that they still can't comprehend you. There's a sacredness to not being fully understood, a power in being untouchable even when visible. You left breadcrumbs, not blueprints. You shared glimpses, not your soul, and that restraint elicits greater respect than any proclamation. People are weary of filters, of noise, of striving to maintain a facade of perfection. You remind them of the importance of privacy, of possessing depth, of not needing to justify oneself. You demonstrate that remaining unknown in detail doesn't equate to being invisible in spirit. They don't know your complete story, and that captivates them because your unspoken words convey everything. In a world addicted to exposure, you remained concealed long enough to become rare, and now they are unable to look away. Sixth, they assumed you were easily dismissed, but you're unshakable. They expected you to crumble. They anticipated you would crack under duress or vanish after the dissemination of rumors. Your silence fostered the belief that you were weak. Your distance led them to assume you were defeated. However, they failed to recognize that your absence was strategic, not a surrender. You weren't concealing yourself. You were building, healing, listening, learning, and now they realize they grossly misjudged you. Your name was dragged into conversations intended to tarnish your image. People exaggerated events, fabricated narratives, and attempted to portray you through a distorted lens. Some laughed, some concurred, some simply observed, but none anticipated that you would emerge stronger, clearer, and more grounded than ever. You didn't respond with pandemonium. You didn't defend yourself at every turn. You allowed the falsehoods to dissipate, and while they were focused on tarnishing your reputation, you were elevating yourself with quiet consistency, and now the same voices that once conspired against you whisper again, but now with reverence. They're remarking, "They aren't who we thought," because you weren't ostentatious, but you remained steadfast. You weren't aggressive, but you were resolute. You didn't attempt to clear your name. You became the kind of person whose presence restores harmony without uttering a word. That unyielding energy you now exude didn't stem from accolades. It emerged from weathering storms without applause. You were tested, attacked, misunderstood, and you remained intact. You rebuilt yourself gradually, silently, without seeking recognition. And now those who attempted to dismiss you have no option but to respect you, because you've demonstrated that true strength doesn't perform, it endures. Your resilience baffled them. Your serenity offended them. Your refusal to succumb to their traps exposed the limitations of their character. And now they appear bewildered because their intention was to bury you, not to witness your blossoming. The reality is they never expected you to be so resilient, so astute, so complete. And now their admiration is tinged with regret because they could have stood beside you, but instead they attempted to tear you down. And you merely persisted in rising. Seventh, you served as their mirror, and they couldn't withstand the reflection. They didn't mock you because you were peculiar. They mocked you because they were afraid. You were a mirror they weren't prepared to confront. Your honesty, your vulnerability, your ability to present yourself without pretense, it exposed everything they were concealing. They were performing, pretending, conforming to survive, while you stood raw, unfiltered, and unapologetically yourself. That terrified them more than they would concede. You didn't adhere to the script. You expressed your true sentiments. You walked away when it felt wrong. You displayed emotions they had been taught to suppress. And because they couldn't emulate you, they ridiculed you for doing so. They labeled you excessive, profound, or atypical, not because it was accurate, but because your freedom accentuated their captivity. They weren't judging you. They were reacting to the feelings your presence evoked: vulnerability, Your authenticity sparked discomfort not because you were mistaken, but because you reminded them of a self they abandoned long ago. You evoked emotions they had suppressed, and rather than embracing them, they lashed out. Instead of seeking understanding, they resorted to jokes because ridiculing you was simpler than facing themselves. However, the script has been rewritten. Time has elapsed. Some have matured. Others have suffered life's hardships in the same manner they once ridiculed you, and suddenly you make sense. Suddenly your depth doesn't seem melodramatic. It appears wise. Your boundaries don't seem restrictive. They seem essential. Your silence is no longer peculiar. It is powerful. They now realize that you weren't being excessive. You were being genuine, and they couldn't cope then because they didn't know how to be genuine themselves. However, life has a way of humbling individuals. Now that their masks have shattered or their performances have depleted them, they perceive you differently. They finally comprehend that what they perceived as odd actually made you whole. And the most impactful aspect, you never sought vengeance. You didn't retaliate with their words. You allowed your actions to speak volumes. You continued to evolve. You remained true to yourself, and now the very mirror they once fled is the one they quietly examine, hoping to discover the same truth within themselves. 8th, your lifestyle has evolved into their secret roadmap. They'll never admit it outright, but you've become the touchstone, the unspoken benchmark, the covert influence shaping their shifting perspectives, their deepened reflections, and their increasingly impassioned discourse. They don't repost your content, but they often peruse it. They refrain from commenting on your words, but they capture screenshots of your quotes and store them. They tread your path surreptitiously, hoping their guiding light remains unacknowledged. They previously dismissed your chosen lifestyle, your boundaries, your introspective nature, your focused pursuits. They derided it as odd, excessive, or superfluous, yet now they're discreetly emulating it. Those who formerly mocked your discipline now endeavor to cultivate routines. The ones who once dismissed your spiritual discourse now disseminate it as their own wisdom. They witnessed your unwavering dedication despite the absence of applause. They observed you persevere, evolve, and align your actions without seeking attention. And through that process, you became their silent mentor. They won't concede it because acknowledgement would entail admitting their misjudgment. It would require acknowledging that the truth was before them all along, yet they rejected it. Pride prevents them from offering you deserved accolades, but imitation reveals a respect they're too proud to vocalize. They mimic your cadence because it carries gravitas. They adapt their vocabulary to mirror your aura. They subtly and cautiously adjust their belief systems, always avoiding mention of your name, yet invariably tracing your steps. They're striving to attain what you've discovered without admitting you were the trailblazer. You didn't just inspire them, you rewired them. You didn't lecture them, you demonstrated. You became the embodiment of an alternative way to live authentically, profoundly, spiritually, and unapologetically. And that leaves an enduring impact even in silence. What they replicate transcends your style. It's your essence, and that accounts for its staying power. You became the unspoken roadmap they refuted needing. And although they may never credit you, your influence is evident in their present demeanor. It's apparent in their momentary pause before reacting, their deliberate contemplation before speaking, their gradual transition towards becoming more of who they were meant to be. All because you illuminated the path without conscious effort. Ninth, what they applaud now is what they once sought to undermine. It's almost ironic how the very things they once criticized you for are now the qualities they admire in others. Your gentleness, formerly perceived as weakness, is now extolled as emotional intelligence. Your independence, which made them uneasy, is now celebrated as strength. Your discipline, once labeled controlling or rigid, is suddenly regarded as inspiring, and your intuition, the very faculty they ridiculed and dismissed, is now what they're diligently trying to cultivate. They didn't despise those qualities, they merely resented observing them in someone who reminded them they had inner work to do. The truth is, you were never the source of the problem. You were simply ahead of your time. Your clarity made them feel vulnerable. Your self-respect compelled them to examine their own lack of boundaries. And because they couldn't align with your position, they attempted to tear you down. This is the typical response when individuals feel threatened, yet lack understanding. They attack what they don't yet possess the courage to embody. You weren't overly intense, sensitive, or atypical. You were merely operating from a higher plane. They labeled your radiance as excessive because it amplified the shadows within them. But now, after enduring life's humbling experiences, after undergoing some form of breakdown or awakening, they perceive those traits through a new lens. Now they recognize your gentleness as power, your independence as wisdom, your discipline as self-mastery, and your intuition as divine guidance. They now espouse the very qualities they sought to eradicate within you. They repost content echoing sentiments you voiced years ago. They're finally embracing the traits you always possessed, albeit not within you, because it's easier to celebrate those traits in someone else than to concede they stifled them in you out of fear, jealousy, or ignorance. And that's the uncomfortable truth. They attempted to break the very qualities they now seek. You were never excessive. You were simply precocious. You were the embodiment of the lesson before they were ready to grasp it. And now every time they laud those traits in another, it simply reaffirms your righteousness. 10th, they've been haunted by your response to disrespect. They didn't anticipate your composure. They expected an outburst. They expected anger, pandemonium, perhaps even retaliation. But what they encountered instead was something unexpected: your silence, your maturity, your ascension. You didn't scream. You didn't expose. You didn't reciprocate their disrespect. You simply rose above it, leaving them speechless. And now that moment replays endlessly in their minds. You made them uneasy not through your words, but through your silence, because they were counting on your reaction. They wanted a spectacle they could exploit. They were poised for drama, for conflagration, for evidence of your instability or bitterness. So to wrap it all up, remember this: your journey, with all its unique twists and turns, is a powerful catalyst. The shift you're seeing, the hidden admiration, the quiet respect, it's all a testament to your authenticity, your resilience, and your unwavering commitment to your own growth. Embrace the journey, trust your inner compass, and know that even those who once doubted you are now in their own way acknowledging the incredible light you bring to the world. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you experienced something similar? What resonated most with you? Leave a comment below, ask a question, or just join the discussion. Let's create a space for shared experiences and supportive insights. And if you found this helpful, inspiring, or just plain thought-provoking, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future explorations of self-discovery, personal growth, and navigating the complexities of human connection. Until next time, keep shining. Keep shining, keep shining, keep shining.